The distress call echoed across the stars, screaming through fractured frequencies in broken code. It came from a mining colony called Argon-6, a small world at the edge of galactic space. Once rich with titanium and rare elements, now burning, under attack. The Zorith Dominion had arrived with fire. Their ships tore the sky apart, their machines hunted the people. And the colony's last communication tower cracked and half melted, sent out a single desperate message. To any ship, to any world, please, we are dying. But no one answered, not Earth, not the trade federations, not the Council of Peace. Argon-6 wasn't important enough. It was a number in a forgotten zone. And besides, the Dominion didn't lose battles. Everyone knew that. Everyone but one man, far away. On an abandoned launch site deep beneath the sands of old Nevada, the valiant Dust came to life. Dust had settled on its hull for 40 years. Its engines were quiet, its circuits dark. No crew had touched it since. Earth's mothballed its deep space fleet. The world had moved on choosing treaties, not war. But the valiant Dust had waited. And tonight, something inside it stirred. Lights blinked. Power surged. A low hum began to rise in its ancient frame. Inside, the launch bay stood Captain Raylan Holt, tall, weathered, silent. His eyes stared at the blinking screen in front of him. The distress call played again. Broken, faint. Human voices screaming. Then nothing. He didn't move for a full minute. Just stood there in the cold glow of flickering consoles. The command room around him was abandoned old maps, empty coffee cups, cracked monitors. This was the grave of a forgotten fleet. But Raylan hadn't forgotten. Because once, long ago, he'd promised to protect the stars. And the stars had just cried out for help. He moved. He didn't ask permission. There was no one left to give. Earth's governments were shadows, its armies buried beneath peace talks and digital paper. But Raylan walked into the valiant Dust like he belonged there. The ship welcomed him. Not like a tool, more like an old friend waking from a long sleep. The doors opened. Lights flickered in patterns not found in any manual. The systems powered up one after another, engines, shields, weapons, even subsystems no one had touched in decades. Some of them didn't look human at all. They pulsed with strange colors, strange code. Raylan strapped in. Destination. The ship's voice asked, not a typical AI. Deeper, older. It sounded more like something remembering itself. Argon-6, Raylan said. Outnumbered, the voice replied. No backup. Low odds of survival. Raylan smiled faintly. I've faced worse. And with that, the valiant Dust roared to life. It didn't rise like a normal vessel. It launched like it had been waiting for this moment. The launch bay shattered. Stone and sand thrown miles into the sky. The engines cut a trail of silver flame as the ship punched through Earth's atmosphere and vanished into the stars. Somewhere. Satellites tried to track it. But the ship blurred through their scans. They couldn't lock on. Couldn't follow. It was like chasing a ghost. Because this ship didn't fly like other ships. It moved like it remembered something older than science. Something deeper than technology. Hours later, Raylan sat alone in the cockpit, eyes locked on the star maps. The Dominion fleet was ahead, too. Destroyers, 3 raiders, and a siege carrier, all orbiting Argon-6 like vultures. So on the surface, the colony was still sending weak signals. Crying for help. Hoping. Dying. Raylan didn't look away. He tapped the control panel. The ship shifted. Approaching battle zone, the voice said. No reinforcements, Raylan replied. No problem, ship answered. That made him pause, because the ship had never said that before. He looked around. The lights were brighter now. The walls breathed with power. Something was happening inside the valiant Dust. Something more than engines, more than code. It felt alive. Then the enemy detected them. Alarms lit up on Dominion screens. Human ship, inbound at impossible speed. I laughed at first. One ship? Against them? A mistake? But the valiant dust didn't stop. It accelerated faster. Faster are his hands moved with instinct. The ship responded like thought, not machine. Missiles launched. Beams split the dark, and the first Dominion Raider exploded. Before it even had time to raise shields, then the sky caught fire. The battle had begun. And in that moment, across command centers and backroom war tables, across peaceful worlds and secret bunkers, a single truth was born. Someone had answered the call, and the galaxy was about to find out what one human and one ship would really do. In orbit above Argon 6, the wreckage floated in silent pieces. The remains of Dominion ships spun lifeless in zero-gravity burnt hulls, shattered wings, melting cores. Some still smoked from energy burns no known weapon could explain. No survivors, no escape pods, just debris and silence. The mighty Dominion, feared across 10 star sectors, had been wiped out in minutes, not by a fleet, not by a new species, but by one old ship and one human that shouldn't have stood a chance. Captain Raylan Holt leaned back in the command seat, breathing steady, eyes scanning the fading flashes of fire across space. His face was calm, but his hands still trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from something else. Something deeper. Mine felt like it had stretched, merged. For those moments during the battle, it wasn't just him flying the valiant dust. It was them. The ship and Raylan had moved as one, like two voices in one song. But that wasn't supposed to be possible. Not for a human, and not with this ship. Because the valiant dust was not just a forgotten Earth warship. It was a mystery buried under lies, silence, and time. Built with human hands, yes, but its core, its systems, its soul, none of it matched anything Earth had ever designed. Even Raylan, who had once served in the highest ranks of Earth's defense command, knew the truth. This ship didn't come from the ground. It came from beneath it. And now it had awakened. Damage report, Raylan said, his voice low. Systems at 94%, the ship replied. The voice was different, now less robotic, more like a whisper from a dream. Minor hull scarring, energy reserves recharging. You did well? Raylan stared at the console. I didn't do that. You moved faster than I could think. Did think, the ship said, and I listened. Raylan paused. You weren't this alive before. I was sleeping, the voice replied, until you brought me to war. The words weren't comforting. They were chilling. He stood, walking, down the dim corridor toward the ship's core chamber. The walls pulsed with slow waves of light-shifting colors that made no logical sense. Blue, green, silver, something between all of them. He placed his hand on the sealed door. It opened without a sound. Inside was the core, and it wasn't human. It hovered in the center of the room, a sphere of rotating rings, glowing symbols, and drifting particles. It made no noise, but it hummed in his bones. And Raylan felt it again, that strange connection between memory and motion. The ship wasn't using AI. It wasn't using programming. It was using him, feeding off his thoughts, reading his instincts, amplifying his intent. And in return, it was teaching him things. Thoughts that weren't his. Strategies, pathways, maneuvers he'd never learned. As if the ship was remembering a war it had fought long before Earth ever reached the stars, Raylan turned away. Too many questions. And not enough time? Argon 6 was still below smoldering. Wounded. Barely alive. He had come to stop the Dominion. Now he had to help the survivors. The dust descended slowly through the clouds, hiding its energy signature. No heroic entrance. No announcements. Raylan landed near a shattered hangar, stepping out into the toxic wind, his face wrapped in a filter mask. Smoke rose from the ruins. Bodies lay twisted in the dust. But then, from the shadows, movement. A dozen civilians, eyes wide, clothes torn, slowly emerged. They looked at Raylan like he was a ghost. You came, one woman said. I heard. Your call, he replied simply. No one else did. I'm not no one, Raylan said. and then one of the children stepped forward, staring at the ship behind him. "What is it?" the child asked. "It looks old." Raylan glanced. Back at the valiant dust, the ship stood silent again, but somehow alert, watching. "It's older than you think," he said. "And it's not just a ship." The survivors were evacuated, first loaded aboard using converted cargo pods. The dust reconfigured itself to carry them, its walls shifting and adapting without machinery. When asked how he did it, Raylan only said, "It wasn't me." They asked where he came from. He said, "Earth." They asked why he came alone. He said because no one else would. But in truth, even Raylan didn't fully know why he was the one. He only knew something had called him that night, just as he had heard Argon 6's signal. And now the galaxy was listening. News of the battle spread fast, leaked across pirate bands, resistance forums, military channels. Videos of the valiant dust destroying 5 ships in under 60 seconds. The ship that moved without fuel, the man who didn't speak to cameras, but made war look like music. The Dominion denied it at first, then went silent. Other colonies began sending signals. They didn't ask for governments. They didn't ask for fleets. They asked for the man with the ship. But Raylan knew this wasn't over. The Zorith Dominion wouldn't take this loss quietly. They would come back with more ships, more fire, more anger. Next time it wouldn't be just one colony they wanted to erase. They would come for him. And the valiant dust would be waiting. Because whatever this ship truly was, it had just remembered how to fight. Word of the destruction at Argon 6 traveled faster than light. Pirate radios buzzed with broken audio. Secret military feeds whispered about an impossible ship. Outer Rim traders passed the tale like a wildfire. 1 human, 1 vessel, 5 Dominion. Warships reduced to dust. It sounded like legend, like propaganda. But in the Zoroth Dominion's central war hub, it was logged as fact. Internal reports were cold, clinical, and terrified. A new threat had emerged, and the worst part, it wasn't a species. It wasn't a rebellion. It was just one man in a ship that shouldn't exist. Captain Raylan Holt didn't care about the panic he'd caused. He didn't watch the news feeds. He wasn't looking to be famous. Right now, his focus was on the small things, scrubbing Argon 6's air filters, helping wounded civilians board recovery drones, dragging twisted metal off collapsed shelters. The valiant dust floated just above the colony, silent again. Its lights dimmed, like a beast catching its breath. Moved through the chaos like a soldier without orders, but with purpose burning in every step. Then, as the last evac shuttle lifted off, the sky cracked open again. This time, there were no warnings, no threats, no scans, just a rip through space. And 7 Dominion destroyers dropped out of warp above the planet. Bigger, faster, meaner than before. They didn't send a message. They didn't hesitate. Opened fire. The moment they arrived, the first pulse hit the mountains to the north, vaporizing the landscape. The second struck the ocean, boiling it into steam. The third was aimed directly at the valiant dust. Raylan didn't run. He sprinted for the ramp. Heart hammering, eyes locked on the descending flame. "Shields up," shouted as he crossed. "The threshold. They're already up." The ship replied calmly. The plasma beam struck the valiant dust head-on, and it bounced. A shockwave rippled through the sky. But the ship didn't flinch. The hull shimmered like liquid steel, absorbing energy and releasing it back in a silent surge of light. Inside, the ship pulsed with power. Raylan reached the cockpit. Controls lit up before he touched them. The seat wrapped around him, sinking instantly. "Ready?" the ship asked. Raylan grinned. The valiant dust launched straight into the fire. But this wasn't like the first battle. This was different. This time, Raylan wasn't testing the ship this time. It was part of it. The first Dominion destroyer targeted them with 6 beam cannons, triangulating from all sides. Standard tactic. Overwhelm, surround, eliminate. But the dust didn't dodge. It folded. Space shimmered around it.
For a moment, the ship wasn't where it should have been.
It reappeared behind the destroyer, flipped upside down, fired a short burst one. pulsed straight into the warship's rear engine core. The destroyer didn't explode, it imploded, vanishing into itself like it had never existed. Raylan didn't speak. He moved like instinct. The ship moved with him. The second destroyer tried to fire. Too slow. The dust was already above it, slicing down its bridge with a razor-thin beam of blue energy that left no heat, only silence. The third and fourth launched fighter swarms. The dust's defense grid activated for the first time, spinning, shifting, humming with soundless frequency. Drones melted mid-flight. Some turned around. Others simply shut off and dropped. It was as if the ship spoke a language the enemy tech couldn't understand, couldn't resist. The fifth ship attempted to retreat. Raylan whispered, "No." The dust extended something from its correlite, a field. A pulse, and the retreating ship froze in space, trapped in a shimmering web. Then gently, it folded in half, vanishing like a star going dark by now. The last two Dominion vessels were broadcasting distress signals, begging for reinforcement, calling it a weapon breach, code a quantum event, a system anomaly. But across the galaxy, the truth had already taken root. The Dominion had been broken, not by a fleet, not by an empire, but by a single human pilot. In a ship that bent the rules of war, inside the dust, Raylan finally exhaled. "I didn't even fire half-hour." "Systems," he muttered. "You're not ready for the others," the ship replied. He paused. "There's more?" The ship didn't answer. Raylan looked out at the debris field, at the scattered remains of what had once been 7 warships. Below, the colony's survivors watched in awe. They had just witnessed the impossible. But the message that spread from Argon 6 wasn't just about power, it was about fear. The Dominion couldn't explain what happened. Earth hadn't even admitted Raylan existed, and the valiant dust. Its origins were still a blank space in every database. Across war rooms and shadow councils, question rose, what else is Earth hiding? But Raylan already knew the answer. They weren't hiding weapons, they were hiding him, and now that he was awake, the galaxy would never sleep again. In the cold reaches of Dominion space, in a fortress station surrounded by burning suns and black-armored warships, a new council was forming. They called it the Core Directive, a special crisis unit made up of the Zorith Dominion's highest strategists, oldest generals, and most ruthless minds. Their purpose wasn't conquest, wasn't control. It was something far simpler: find and kill the human in the impossible ship. Every report pointed to one name: Raylan Holt, a relic of Earth's past, former military captain discharged for refusing orders, a man believed dead. And yet here, he was piloting a ghost ship that defied physics, breaking war fleets in half, and disappearing before they could even react. The Dominion didn't understand what they were facing, but they feared it, and they didn't like to fear anything, so they responded the only way they knew: how they sent everything through armadas. Not scout ships, not destroyers. Entire war formations, each led by a grand warlord with decades of blood behind them. They didn't just want Raylan dead, they wanted to erase him from memory, to make an example so terrifying that no colony, no world would ever whisper his name again. But Raylan was already gone. By the time the fleets reached Argon 6, the colony was empty. The civilians had been evacuated. The land was quiet. Only ash remained, and one single message burned into a canyon wall by the valiant dust's engines: "You're too late." The Dominion fumed, but what terrified them more than the message was the silence from Earth, because Earth hadn't claimed. Raylan hadn't defended him, hadn't said a word. No diplomats, no protests, no broadcasts. As far as the galaxy knew, Earth was watching and smiling. This silence was not weakness. It was calculated. And every government that once mocked Earth now leaned in close, watching, wondering, what else are they hiding? Back aboard the valiant dust, Raylan sat in the dark. He floated in deep space. Far from any star, in the hollow between systems, the void range, a dead zone where no ship dared enter. Here, the Dominion wouldn't find him. Not yet. He had time to think, and right now he was thinking about Earth. They had known. They had too. No one built a ship like the Dust by accident. No one buried it without reason. And no one let a man like him walk into its cockpit unless they planned it all. He opened the ship's memory logs again. Most of it was still, encrypted, locked with ancient codes and shifting language. But the more time he spent inside, the more the ship trusted him, not in words, but in feeling. It let him see flashes, fragments, a brief image of a human face, a scientist maybe, another of a council chamber Earth general staring at a star map, pointing to Dominion space. Then a voice, deep and clear, playing back in Raylan's mind. This isn't a ship, it's a test. We don't need a fleet, just the right man. Raylan clenched his fists. They had sent him to die or win. Either way, it wasn't part of Earth's future plans. He was just a trigger, a weapon with a name. The Dominion fleets were searching for him now. Sweeping sectors like bloodhounds, whole. Planets were being shut down, scanned, questioned. Any colony suspected of harboring him was punished. Trade routes were blockaded, refugees turned away. The stars were choking in fear. Raylan watched it all happen from orbit above a silent moon, broadcasting no signal, cloaked by the Dust's strange field. He knew what he had to do. Next, it wasn't about running anymore. It wasn't about hiding. If Earth had planned to use him as a ghost weapon, then so be it. He would use their silence as a shield and turn their fear into fire. Ship, he said. Pull all Dominion fleet routes. Find weak points. The console glowed. Maps spread in front of him, lighting up like veins through the stars. Yellow lines marked fuel depots. Red dots marked fleet command hubs. Blue threads marked civilian transports guarded by minimal forces. Then one cluster pulsed. Zorith Relay. Nexus, the ship whispered. Central coordination system. Vulnerable. Protected by a single shield array. Raylan smiled. It was time for the Dominion to stop chasing ghosts and start bleeding. He leaned forward. Plotted jump. The ship obeyed without question, and as the stars bent around them, Raylan felt the weight of something bigger rising behind him, because Earth may have stayed silent. But the galaxy was now screaming, and in the center of all that noise stood one man in one ship, ready to break everything. The stars twisted into threads of light as the valiant Dust emerged from its warp jump, silent and cloaked. Drifting in the shadows near the Zorith Relay Nexus, the Dominion's central communications array loomed in the distance, a lattice of crystal satellites and massive towers spinning slowly around a red dwarf. From here they controlled signals across a third of their empire. Orders, reinforcements, supply routes all flowed through this one point. Taking it out wouldn't just be a blow to strategy, it would be a message. No one was untouchable anymore, Captain. Raylan Holt didn't move at first. He stood inside the Dust's core chamber, staring at the impossible machine that pulsed in the center. The Koran orb of rings and floating shards hovered silently in the air, as if it was listening. He had come here again not to issue commands, but to ask questions, because something wasn't right. Each time he flew the Dust, each time he fought, the bond between them grew deeper, too deep. He wasn't just piloting anymore. He was remembering things that weren't his. He saw stars he'd never visited, heard voices speaking in languages humanity had never recorded, and worst of all, when he dreamed of wars older than Earth. Talk to me, Raylan said quietly. What are you? What am I flying? The core responded, not in words, but in pulses of emotion, vision, memory. The walls flickered, a projection formed, a star map, not one Raylan recognized. The shapes of the constellations were wrong. Then one planet zoomed in massive, dark, orbited by dozens of moons. A voice, ancient and low, echoed from the ships. Systems. Homeworld, Veltaroon, time frame, 67,000 years ago. Project, Exile Protocol. Raylan's breath caught. This wasn't just alien tech. This was a living relic from a race the galaxy no longer remembered. The valiant Dust wasn't Earth's creation. It had been recovered from somewhere buried, hidden, forgotten, and Earth had kept that secret. Raylan walked back to the cockpit, staring at the shifting map the ship had shown him. Veltaroon, a dead system now. But this ship had survived its end. It had crossed time itself. And somehow, Earth had found it, and waited for someone like him to step inside. Suddenly, it all made sense. The strange connection. The way the ship moved with his. Thoughts? He wasn't flying it. The ship had been choosing him. Shaped by his pain. Fueled by his fury, it sought out a pilot who would finish a war started thousands of years ago. But the enemy wasn't just the Zeroth Dominion. It was a larger design, something hidden deep in galactic history. And Raylan Holt, a man forgotten by Earth, was now the last living piece of it. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden alert. Dominion patrol incoming, the ship warned. 3 cruisers, 1 battle class. Raylan slid into the pilot seat. Do they see us? No. Shall I engage? Raylan looked out at the relay nexus. Not yet. He needed more answers. But he could feel it. Now the dust was awakening more every day. It wasn't a weapon. It was a memory wrapped in armor, and it was remembering everything. Let them pass, Raylan said, and open the logs again. Me more. The ship hesitated, then released another data fragment. This time it wasn't a vision. It was a voice message. Human. This is Commander Ulrich Graves, Earth Defense Archive. If you're hearing this, the dust has bonded with you. You need to understand. We didn't build it. We found it under the moon during the Titan excavation. We tried. To control it, we failed. Oh. So we buried it again. Until we had someone broken enough to pilot it. That someone is you. Raylan froze. Earth hadn't chosen him because of his skill. They chose him because he had nothing left to lose. Because they needed someone willing to burn the stars if it meant justice. The dust didn't respond. It didn't need to. Raylan understood now. He wasn't just a pilot. He was the last chapter in a story written long before Earth ever raised its first city and the enemy. The Zoroth Dominion was just the beginning. He turned back to the relay nexus. Lights blinked. Patterns shifted. Data streamed from it like rivers of fire. Raylan narrowed his eyes. Let's shut them up, he said. The dust surged forward, silent, invisible, death in the dark. And behind them, the past watched. And waited to rise again, in the depths. Of the Tyros vortex, a swirling storm of radiation and fractured gravity, 1,000 Dominion ships vanished. Not over months, not over days, in minutes. Force so vast it darkened stars as it passed, gone without warning, without trace, without explanation. Only one message escaped before the silence. He's here. Panic spread like poison through the Dominion's command ranks. They called it a data error, then a rogue anomaly, and a weapon malfunction. But none of their explanations could hide the truth anymore. The Dominion's best fleet, the very pride of its military, had chased one man into a trap and never returned. Captain Raylan Holt watched the aftermath from high orbit above the Tyros vortex. On every Dominion channel, confusion reigned. Orders scrambled, signals crossed, entire sectors went dark. Raylan had chosen this system for a reason. Its unstable physics made long-range scans nearly useless. The moment the fleet warped in, the valiant dust had activated something buried. Deep in its core, not a bomb, not a beam. Something older. Raylan didn't fully understand it. He didn't need to. The ship had done what it was designed to do. Erase. Now, in the storm's eerie silence, Raylan sat motionless in the command seat. Lights pulsed faintly around him. The dust was quiet, almost resting, like a beast that had just fed. But he wasn't at peace. His hands shook. Not from fear, from the weight of what he'd done. One man. One ship. 1,000 vessels. He had crossed a line few ever dared. And the galaxy noticed every major news channel. Every rebel group. Every secret resistance. Cells. They all spoke his name now. Not as a rumor, not as a myth, as a threat back on Earth. Silence still ruled. No denial, no confession, but in the shadows of hidden bases. In the cold quiet of war rooms buried deep beneath the surface. Old eyes watched the stars, They had unleashed the weapon, and it had learned how to bite, on the other side of the galaxy. The Zorith High Empress screamed in rage. Her throne room, once a place of calculation and cold logic, now burned with panic, advisors argued.
No.
Generals whispered about retreat. The Dominion had ruled for centuries, but now a new war had begun, a war against a ghost, because they could not find the dust. They could not track RAL, and every time they tried, they lost more to the galaxy at large. The message was clear. The Dominion could bleed, and when empires bleed, others rise. From hidden asteroid colonies, human pirate lords sent offers to Raylan, promises of alliances, fleets, credits, territory. He ignored them all. They didn't understand. This wasn't about power. This wasn't about building a new empire. This was about burning the old one down. Inside the dust, the ship spoke quietly as Raylan watched the stars. "You're changing?" Raylan didn't answer. "You feel it, don't you?" The ship continued. "Each battle, each decision. I don't guide you anymore. You guide me." He nodded slowly. It was true. The line between him and the ship was vanishing. He didn't know if that was evolution or the beginning of madness, but he knew this. There was no turning back. The destruction of the Tyros fleet wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the fall. He tapped a new star system into the console. "Where are we going?" the ship asked. "To where it started," Raylan said. "Earth." "No," he said. "Before Earth. Before everything." The ship was silent for a moment. Then it displayed a single name, VEL-TARUN, the long-dead homeworld. Of the race that had built the valiant dust, a place no one had visited in 67,000 years, a graveyard of knowledge and answers. Raylan leaned back. If he was going to finish this, he needed to know the full truth. He needed to understand what this ship really was, and what it had made him, because the galaxy feared him now, but he feared something worse, that maybe he wasn't just flying the dust, maybe he was becoming part of it, and if that was true, then the war wasn't just changing everything, it was changing him forever. Veltarune was nothing like Raylan imagined. It wasn't a ruin or a shattered battlefield. It wasn't some ancient city swallowed by time. No, the long-dead homeworld of the ship's creators was still intact. Hidden beneath a blanket of gravity, distortions, and false star patterns. It had been masked from the galaxy so thoroughly that even automated probes would bend around it. Sensors corrupted before they could detect anything. But the valiant dust knew how to cut through the veil because it had been born here. And now, after thousands of years, it had brought its human pilot home. Raylan stepped out of the ship and felt the silence first. The world was quiet, too quiet. No wind, no birds, no distant hum of power. The trees, tall and black with glowing veins, stood unmoving. Sky was a dim violet, swirling with slow-moving clouds that never changed shape. Structures stretched across the horizon, tall and thin, some still flickering with faint energy. The city was frozen, like it had gone to sleep mid-thought. But Raylan didn't walk like a stranger. With each step, memories he didn't know returned. Faces, voices, decisions, not from his life, but from someone else's, or something else's. Inside the dust, the ship's voice grew soft, not cold, not robotic, almost human. You remember, don't you? He nodded. Yes, he remembered things no human should. The war that destroyed the Veltarune, civilization hadn't been against aliens or machines. It had been internal, a split, a civil war. Between two factions, those who wanted to share their technology with other species, and those who believed no one was worthy, and the dust, it had once belonged to the rebels, to those who believed the stars should be shared, it's not ruled. They lost. Their cities were buried, their names erased, and their creations like the dust were, locked away under layers of time and silence, until Earth found one, and Earth unknowingly handed it to the only kind of person the ship would accept, a man broken by war, sick of lies, and filled with something the Veltarune rebels had once called pure intent. Raylan stood before a massive hall now, its doors opened slowly. Not by tech, but by recognition. Inside was a single chamber, filled with circular glyphs and floating records. He stepped into the center, and suddenly the walls came alive, flashing memories, images, star charts. He saw the First War, a sky filled with ships like the dust, thousands of them. He saw the last battle, and he saw the exile. One ship, his ship fleeing through time, crossing generations. Crashing into the darkness, the dust had been designed not just to survive, but to find someone like him. A weapon guided by conscience, a mind that would not obey blindly. Raylan fell to his knees as the truth filled him. He wasn't just using this ship, he was the final piece of its mission, its memory, its purpose. And now that he had awakened its core, he felt it fully. The power was changing him, not in strength, speed, but in perception. He was starting to think like the ship, move like it. He didn't see time the same way anymore. He felt coming events as shadows. He knew what enemies would do before they did it. He saw pathways through warlike light, through fog, and that terrified him. Because if he wasn't careful, he wouldn't be Raylan Holt anymore. He would be something else. The valiant dust spoke again, low and certain. You are becoming what I was meant to serve. Not a pilot, a guardian, a judge. Raylan whispered, I didn't ask for this. The ship answered, That's why you were chosen. Suddenly, alarms echoed inside the chamber. A distant rumble shook the ground. From orbit, the Dominion had arrived. They tracked his jump, sent a scout force. 5 warships. 1 planetary drill meant to crack Veltaroon open and destroy anything they couldn't understand. Raylan stood up slowly, eyes clear, breathing steady. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was ready. Let them land, he said, preparing defense. Systems, the ship responded. No, Raylan said. No more hiding, no more cloaking. He stepped outside as the sky filled with fire. Let them see what I've become. And far above, as Dominion troops descended to claim another kill, they saw something they'd never expected. One man standing alone. And the world waking up around him. The buildings rose, the wind screamed, and the valiant dust lit up like it. Remembered the war? Because now it wasn't just a ship, and Raylan wasn't just human. They were the last weapon of a fallen civilization, and they had just chosen to fight back. The battle on Veltaroon became legend within hours. Every planet with a communications node picked up the transmissions. Every resistance cell, neutral world. And Dominion subjects saw the image as a single human, surrounded by glowing constructs. Standing on an ancient world that came alive under his command, the valiant dust floated behind him like a sword raised. To the sky, and above, Dominion warships once feared across the stars fled. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a warning, and everyone heard it across the galaxy. Risings ignited. Colonies that had lived in silent fear for generations finally rose up, inspired by a name the Dominion couldn't erase anymore. Raylan Holt, he wasn't a secret anymore. He wasn't a rumor. He had become a symbol, but symbols of consequences. Back on Earth, in deep underground command bunkers shielded from every scan, the old ones met. Scientists, generals, and shadow decision-makers who had buried the dust long ago gathered in panic. Their plan had worked too well. Raylan was never supposed to survive this long. The dust wasn't supposed to fully awaken in Veltaroon. Should have stayed lost? What do we do now? One of them asked. The answer came from the oldest among them, a woman with silver hair and cold eyes, who had overseen the Titan excavation where the ship was found. She said only one word: watch. Because they knew the truth. Nothing could stop him now, far across space. Raylan sat alone in the valiant dust's cockpit, staring at a map filled with red stars. Each one represented a Dominion outpost, waiting for him to choose. Dust no longer needed to wait for commands. It offered them. Where do we strike? It asked. Raylan didn't answer right away. He was tired. His body ached. His mind still swam with memories of some alien. He wasn't sure where one ended and the other began anymore. But he did know one thing. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about war. It was about liberation. The Dominion had ruled by fear for too long, and fear had a price. "I want the core worlds," Raylan said. "Not the outposts, the capitals, the places they think are untouchable." The ship pulsed with understanding. "They will respond with full force. I'm counting on it," he said. He tapped in the coordinates. One of the Dominion's inner planets, a glittering jewel of luxury and power, appeared on the screen. Zoreth Prime, the heart of their empire. Raylan leaned forward. "We're going to end this where it hurts." The dust jumped. But this time, it wasn't alone, because all across space, dozens of ships blinked into the void behind him. Human ships, rebel ships, even stolen Dominion vessels flown by former slaves and defectors. The galaxy had watched him fight alone for too long now. It was fighting with him. The final battle wasn't just a mission, it was a movement. Zorth Prime had never been attacked in recorded history. Its skies were protected by orbital defense rings, AI cannons, shield lattice, but they were built to stop armies. Not one ship carrying the wrath of a lost civilization, and not the fury of 100. Broken worlds rising at once. The fight didn't last days. It lasted hours. Raylan didn't need to command fleets. He was the signal. The dust tore through Dominion defenses like they weren't even there. Raylan didn't just destroy ships, he unraveled them, using ancient tech that bent light and gravity. Beside him, rebel ships swarmed the surface, disabling power grids, freeing labor camps, toppling towers that had stood for centuries. Zorth Prime fell, and when it did, the Dominion collapsed with it. There were no treaties, no surrender, just silence. Raylan didn't claim a throne. He didn't call himself a king. He landed the valiant dust on the ashes of the Dominion capital, stepped out into the light, and simply said, "You're free now. Do better with it." And then he vanished. Some say he returned to Earth. Some say he left the galaxy entirely. Others say the dust still drifts through deep space, watching, waiting for the next time it's needed. But one thing is certain, the galaxy will never forget. The day it learned what humans really are, not conquerors, not invaders, but something far more dangerous. A species that never stops rising when it falls. A spark that always survives. A memory that never dies. And now that memory flies among the stars in a ship older than time, waiting for the next war it must end.